Hi and welcome to Seen and Heard. My name is Allison Tristao and I'm the Community Field Representative at Western United Dairies. Today we have the CEO of Western, Anja Raudabaugh, on the podcast to talk about a recent Policymaker tour. So let's get into it. Hi folks, hope you had a great week. Well, we're certainly sitting in a much better place in terms of dairy prices than we were just a short month ago. We have seen block prices gain about 60 cents from that low in the 130s back up into the 190s this week, and block prices generally held steady. We did see, however, near the end of the week, barrels coming under a little bit more pressure. We did lose 5 cents today, and we finished the week a little bit lower. We are hearing out in the countryside that blocks still remain on the tighter side, but that barrels may be a little bit more available. That certainly was represented on the spot market. It was the summer heat that kind of left the cheese market, or the fresh cheese market, feeling a little bit tighter. Remember, the only cheese that can go to Chicago is between 4 and 30 days old. So often we will see these classic fresh cheese squeeze, as you will, when we see summer heat kind of dampen down production. I would say we also heard of exports getting booked and those lower numbers that helped clean up the market some, and also some plant downtime. Needless to say, happy to see some recovery in the cheese market. We will have to see if it lasts. Definitely the rally felt like it might be losing a little steam this week, but hopefully if we do retract, which, not back down to the 130s or 140s, but possibly down in, 180s, 170s, something like that, would be a little bit more palatable. Over on the Class 4 side, butter continues to hang in there. It was down a little bit a few days this week. Non-fat, pretty much steady to slightly lower. That was probably a good outcome given a pretty weak global dairy trade event we saw this Tuesday, where powders, in particular whole milk powder, got hit really hard. Volumes were up in the auction, and Chinese buying was good on that volume, but they certainly were not aggressive in price, and we saw those prices come tumbling down. However, the bid in our domestic non-fat dry milk futures market seems to be strong for now, as end users look to get that coverage on as fall approaches. Next week is fairly quiet in terms of dairy market reports. We have to wait until a little later in the month to get another look at milk production and cold storage levels. Please reach out if you have any questions.
Pacific Gas and Electric is here to remind you that signs keep you safe. Sections of our natural gas transmission pipeline travel underground and beneath agricultural land. For the safety of you, your family, and your employees, pipeline markers are placed to indicate the approximate location of the pipe as a reminder to use extra care. Removing a pipeline marker creates a serious safety hazard. To have additional markers placed or report damaged or missing markers, please call your PG&E account manager or our agricultural customer service center at 877-311-3276. To learn more, visit www.pge.com/agsafety. Remember, signs keep you safe.
Yosemite Farm Credit is the farmer's choice for agriculture financing. As a farmer-owned cooperative, we are dedicated to serving our neighbors in the agriculture community with financial products and services tailored to your operation and backed with a relationship you can trust. Whether you're purchasing real estate, making improvements to the dairy, or wanting to purchase or lease equipment, we're here to help our members prosper. Visit our website at YosemiteFarmCredit.com to find a branch location nearest you.
So today we have on Anja Raudabaugh to talk about a Policymaker tour. So Anja, do you want to dive into that?
Yeah, thanks, Allison. Hello, everyone. Happy Friday or happy weekend. Either way, in farming, weekends are meaningless. I know that. But thanks for having me on again. We concluded a very successful legislative tour. I've mentioned tours before in this podcast, but Western United Dairies, in addition to hosting our Dairy Leaders program through it, we've also started a foundation, which is apolitical, of course. But the foundation has delved deep into hosting on-farm tours for not just legislators, but local county council members, board of supervisors, folks that may have never seen a dairy before. We have a lot of wonderful partners in the dairy industry that do a lot of tour work, maybe from a nutrition aspect. But we wanted to really bring, especially this new crop of legislators, out to dairies. They understood the day-to-day workings. A lot of people legislate from the bench, and they've never really handled a lot of agriculture. We have a lot of turnover in the legislature, and we have a new Assembly Ag Chair. Assembly Member Esmeralda Soria is now the Ag Chair, with Robert Rivas ascending to the speakership in the Assembly. So there's been a bit of shuffling. So our first tour yesterday, of the summer, we've done a few this year, but this tour was with Assembly Member Damon Connolly, who represents the Petaluma, Marin County, and Roanoke Park, and Cotati region. And so he's been wonderful. I know that he's been not only supported by Western, but a lot of the local farm bureaus. And he was a Marin County supervisor. We really like supervisors from where we sit. They always have a good handle on local issues. So he's somewhat familiar with the dairy industry. I'd say he's a little bit more entrenched in the wine and food industry there. But Damon came out and visited Jennifer and Doug Beretta's dairy. So the Baretta Dairy is located in and outside Petaluma, about 8 miles outside of Roanoke Park, actually. And they are about a 200 cow, I think it's 280 maybe total cows with some replacements, organic dairy in Sonoma County. And so they're a son and daughter team. The son, Chris, also works on the dairy. I have to make sure I mention that. And they were wonderful hosts. So the assembly member brought out a lot of his staff. We had our team there, and we just walked through his farm and his dairy, a lot of his calf handling operations. This is one of the number one public-facing, I think, lack of understanding / just inquisitive issues with the public around dairy. They always want to know more about calf care. Animal health and welfare rises to the top of the California consumer's mind at all times when they're purchasing dairy products. So we were very happy that Doug and Jen Beretta had some excellent examples of that calf care. But one of the things that really came up that I think is of note to dairy farmers out there, as this conversation around calf hutches and calf housing continues, we're not going to really be able to get away with that or away from that. We need to think about what additional alternatives may be out there, if any, to the current systems we have in place with animal care and calf care specifically. And so Doug and Jen, actually, the Berettas have partnered with the UC Cooperative Extension to look at, kind of a trial run for some group housing with calf tech. And that project was featured prominently yesterday with the assemblymen. It was essentially, they have some control groups, then they have the group housing with a modified pen, which I actually thought was very affordable. This pen was still, it was about $800 per group hutch, which is not, I think that's a very good price. And it had some unique and modern modifications that allowed the front cage to lift. I know these are details, but I know dairy farmers are probably listening intently, but the front cage could lift up very easily so that you could clean the calf area and move it with a lot of simplicity. But the real control and the real testing here was whether or not the group housing was more healthy or the same health benefits to isolating the calf by itself. And so far, the results have been really, really good. Very, very minimal sucking, very, very minimal. I think there's not a lot of increased bacterial counts, but the UC Cooperative Extension has been out there once a week, testing, measuring. The cows seemed really happy. And so that was a huge highlight for the Assembly member. I think he'd never seen calf care anyway. And so just talking about what potentially could be the next stage of evolution in this was really, really important to Western. We wanted to make sure that people know that we're thinking about these things. There's not always just one way to do things. Maybe there's better ways in the future, but it's really, really difficult. The impression that we were trying to leave with him was that it's really difficult now with his seat on the Ag Committee to just legislate a solution, or if there was a proposition or something like that that was coming up. We really have to make sure that we test and measure metrics on any kind of on-farm change like that, which would include any on-farm change, by the way, not just calf care, but, feeding your cows some random magic beans. You want to make sure that there's some test groups, some control groups, and that we know what those results look like on the other side, especially when it comes to animal health and welfare. So it was a huge highlight of the tour, but the Berettas also have a CDFA-supported AMP grant, and they have a full tilt screw press separator on site, and the Assembly member got to see how that worked. He even got to be showered with a little bit of poo water when we turned it on. So that's becoming kind of a rite of passage as legislators visit our separators. They all get a little shower of poo water. Depending on who they are, we may just tell them that it's water. But they're looking at the composting operation, looking at the separator. These are all things we were able to spend almost 2 hours with the Assembly member and his staff. And because he has such a prominent role on the Ag Committee now and the Assembly, we were really happy to do that.
So does Western plan on hosting more of these tours in the future?
We do. We have quite a few lined up. We're kind of waiting, especially in the Valley, for some of the worst heat weeks to pass us by. But starting again in September, we have a number of Valley legislators and the Valley Air Board we're going to be touring. But specifically, we're going to be hosting DWR out to look at some of these land flex grants that have been issued. We're going to be looking at recharge potential. DWR is, again, I said this in the podcast a couple weeks ago, they've been licking their lips trying to figure out how some of these guys were building berms. And now that some of these same folks have applied and were awarded for land flex, it's a huge, triple threat tour that we're putting together either in September or early October for some of the lower Tule and Westlands regions. Talk about land flex, but the tour program was supported and sponsored by the California Cattle Council, and they have been wonderful partners in this. We are doing a lot of live footage so that B-roll is generated in addition to just having an archive on our own website. But if members or interested parties want to see what we're passing out at these tours, what we're handing out, we are going to be dropping those into our website. But they're beautiful graphics, talk about the dairy industry. We talk about the nutrition components of the dairy industry. And we talk about major issues like the fact that the dairy industry is the only current methane reducer in the state right now. So we talked a little bit about those statistics and just generally what the economy of dairy does to California and does for our consumers. So we're going to be hosting a number of those. I know I've said it once or twice on the podcast, but if you are a farmer and you are interested in putting your hand up for a tour, again, I have a kind of a book of farmers that have said yes, and I say thank you for that. But it's always good to have some additional guys with backup plans. The more innovation you have on your farm, the better your tour prospects are. We really appreciate innovation in this business, and so does the legislature. It helps them in all forms kind of pause when they see legislation that may interfere with your on-farm activities. And this is exactly the response we want to create. We want them to think, well, who would I know that this would affect before they just put their name on the yes button? And so being able to pause when they see some of these practices in action is a huge advantage to doing these live tours on the farm.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on the podcast, Anja, and everyone have a good week.
Thank you.
Thanks to those who are listening, and if you would like a notification when a new episode releases, you can subscribe to the podcast.
Are you tired of hearing that the main way to save water is fallowing? Are you tired of seeing articles about how alfalfa and corn waste water? At Common Good Water, we combine the best-in-class subsurface drip system and precision crop management services, including pest control. Our verification program qualifies for public funding, and we want to help you continue farming in California. Contact your groundwater sustainability agency and ask how you can work with Common Good Water. Visit commongoodwater.com.
Did you know that you can turn your dairy manure into cash? Bennett Environmental is offering above-ground dairy digesters at no cost to you. These systems can also remove nitrates from your lagoons to help you comply with water board regulations. Our proven above-ground technology will generate income for your dairy into the foreseeable future. Because we truck the renewable natural gas off-site, your dairy can profit regardless of your location. Bennett Environmental, turning your wastewater liabilities into sustainable assets. Learn more at bennett-environmental.com.
Thank you to the Western United Dairies generous business sponsors, the Morning Star Company, Holt of California, Farm Credit Alliance, PG&E, Baretta, Swingle, Van Egmond and Goodwin Law Offices, Yosemite Farm Credit, F&R Ag Services, Moss Energy Works, California Dairy Magazine, Bennett Environmental, and Common Good Water. We appreciate our sponsors and thank them for their continued support. While Western United Dairies respects the varied views of our guests, please note that the opinions expressed in the Seen and Heard podcast may not necessarily reflect the positions of the Western United Dairies Board of Directors or our sponsors. If you would like more information on how to sponsor Western United Dairies or this podcast, please send us an email at info@wudairies.com.